All right, welcome back to Q&A in the Kitchen, featuring Sears from Creative Images Tattoo here in Des Moines, Iowa.
And the regular crew.
And these monkeys. DaVo, Piercy guy, Westley, tattooey guy, Jack, tattooey guy, Skin Kitchen Tattoo, also in Des Moines, Iowa. I was curious because when we went into your beautiful new studio, just back up over here, we're almost neighbors. It's kind of cool. Now I don't have an excuse not to stop by. I still have a piece on the back of my thigh. Do you remember that 9/11 piece we started on the back of my thigh?
Yeah.
With the, yeah, that needs to be done. So anyway, yeah, started like 10 plus years ago. Well, it was like right after 9/11. It's like probably within a year. Anyway, she has no idea what I'm talking about. So, but I saw for the longest time back from when I got tattooed by you. You did my first professional tattoo, probably 91 or 2 or something. Anyway, you used the traditional coil machine, the electronic coil machine, and if I'm not mistaken, the other day when we were in there, you are using a rotary style machine.
I am using a rotary machine.
I was a bit surprised, and I've been off and on curious about if you made the switch, because it took me a little while. How long have you been using it?
I love the rotary machine.
Okay,
so
tell me about that.
I have always been an artist, and I'm not very good at the technical parts.
Mm-hmm.
And when I learned to tattoo, I was taught how to put the machines together, how to make adjustments on them, but we tuned by sound.
Yeah.
You know, my teacher was also not very technical. He could make a machine run nice and run smooth,
But couldn't tell you how to do it. You just kind of.
but I didn't know anything about the technical parts of it. If it makes the right sound, it's doing what it's supposed to do.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I rolled with that for a long time.
Uh-huh.
And then, yeah, they finally came out with some rotary machines that were, A, affordable, and B, actually worked. And I like them because it takes all the technical parts away.
Right.
Because a coil machine's like a carburetor. It just requires constant adjustment.
That's good
And
to put it.
and you're guessing on this or that if you don't know all. And if you're a tech weenie, then you're all about, well, you got to use this and you got to do that, and these things go together and these things don't go together. And yeah, I'm just not a tech weenie.
Yeah.
So I just don't care about that stuff.
Because like,
How long?
that's part of my experience of getting tattooed throughout the years. Was like, ugh, take the gloves off, go over, get the equipment out, adjust, put everything back. Okay, now where was I?
Right.
Tattoo, you'd have to do it sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Stop and be like, oh.
Be in the middle of a tattoo, something snaps, break.
Capacitor pops.
You know, God
That's one of
forbid
my
you'd have to
favorites.
replace a spring or something in the middle of a tattoo. You know, 50 minutes of adjustment.
And anybody who spent any times behind an electromagnetic machine, a coil machine, that just happens.
It just does.
Anybody who's used a coil machine for any length of time has had a spring break or a capacitor pop or something tragic go wrong with your machine while you're using it. How long have you been using it? And the one you're using now, is that the one you've been using since you switched, or how many?
It is. I started using them when they first came out with this particular type of machine. They weren't great in the beginning, you know, but they've made some adjustments and better pieces and parts and stuff, and now the ones that we have now are great.
Yeah.
I don't use real expensive fancy ones. Now Molly, my partner, she uses machines that are built by a local artist here who's a tech weenie, and he builds machines that are kind of a cross between a rotary machine, but it does have a spring on it.
Right.
And which they like that for certain types of things. Personally, I just want that machine to drive that needle.
Yeah.
I will take care of all the rest of it.
Exactly.
The hand knows what to do.
Right.
I just want that machine to make that needle go up and down as constantly as possible.
Exactly.
You know, and I'll take care of the rest of it. And so I like a machine that just
works.
Just fucking does it. Yeah, it just delivers it and doesn't do anything else.
That's a good,
So, and it doesn't have a lot of finessing. It doesn't, you know, I call it my black box because it's just a really basic little piece of equipment, you know, and it's just a little black box of equipment.
Right.
But that puppy does everything I want it to do.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like all other machines, just like your coil machines, every one of them's different.
Right.
You know, because I have one that's my liner machine, you know, and it lines like crazy. The others don't do that so good. You know, I have one that will push a big shader all day long and just never break a sweat. And, you know, it's fine for that sort of thing.
Right.
And I have some others that do in between things. And it's funny because they're all the exact same thing, made out of the exact same parts.
But they just
every
run
one
different.
of them just has its own personality.
And with the rotary, you can push all of those needles just as well as the last with that one machine.
Right.
And are you still, excuse me, are you still using traditional tube and needle, or have you switched over to the cartridge?
No, I still use traditional tube and needle. I only just in the last couple of years quit making my own needles.
Yeah.
And using stainless steel tubes,
Nice.
which I did, you know, pretty much all of my career.
Right.
But there again, and my problem was always, I'm kind of cheap. And so
Fair enough.
I could find things that were the quality that I wanted, but they were more than I wanted to pay.
Yeah.
And things that are the price you want to pay, they're not the quality I want to use.
Yeah.
And so that was where I was at. Well, now I have finally found the quality I want for a price I'm willing to pay.
Nice.
And in both needles and tubes. And so now that I've found that, I'm very happy, and and they work really well with my black box. And
how long have you been using the black box?
I'd say probably 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
And did you? Was it your? What's the girl you work with?
Miss Molly.
Miss Molly. Did she turn you on to rotaries, or did you just go into it just because you were curious?
I always knew they were there.
Yeah.
And for years and years, I used one basic supplier. Pretty much, I bought all my stuff from. Well, and as you mentioned earlier, there used to only be 2 basic suppliers.
Right.
Well, now there's hundreds. And so in order to meet my more modern needs, I've been looking at other suppliers. And so other suppliers give you more options that maybe your one supplier doesn't have. And so I was starting to be exposed to more options, and I just decided to try it. And yeah, once I tried it, I liked it. And
I was very much the same way.
I just want to adjust that camera.
Sure.
I don't want to fuck up the flow, and at the same time, so I'm looking at it. It's like, oh, that's a great shot of the tree. Must have bumped it. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I was somewhat the same way when you said about the tubes and everything. You have a way that works. It works. Why really fuck with it or change it?
Right.
I was that way with the coil machines when the rotary machines were becoming kind of the talk of the town, and when the Cheyenne came out with the pods and all that, and I looked at that. As probably just one of these goofy flash in the pan. It's too expensive. Anybody who works in a good busy street shop wouldn't, you know, that's for these guys that work on one piece a day and that might use 3 or 4, maybe 5 pods. If you're in a street shop, you do 6, 8, 10 tattoos a day. You're going to go through 30, 40 bucks worth of you know, it just didn't make sense in my mind.
Effective at some point.
For some people, maybe whatever. Well, the more they stuck around and all that, I ran into somebody that used one of those and was able to finally talk to them and ask them these questions that were kind of bugging me about them. And I ended up buying one because of that. And a lot like you said, it just does exactly what it needs to do. You pick it up every day. It does the exact same thing. You don't have to fuck with it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There's none of this middle ground. So and the thing I love that's great about it is if somebody comes back and they had a bad heel, or it didn't, you know, something just wasn't quite right. Before you had to go, well, how was my machine running that day? I don't remember. I think I was having trouble with my machine. Now it was you. You know, you fucked it up. You know, unless they dug into it or jumped into an acid bath. It was you, because that machine ran the same fucking way.
That machine is so consistent. And I don't know about you, but I've noticed lately, especially here the last couple of years, and I don't know if it's just I've gotten so used to handling that machine or whatever. And some of the other products that we use that are more modern, there's really just very little issue with healing. You know, there's very little scabbing, there's very little oozing, and even stuff that's like in the ditch or other places that are notoriously difficult to heal. That, you know, the healing process is so much better now. And I have to say part of that's got to be because our machines are so good. And when you're using disposable tubes, you always have a good fresh tube. You know, when I was using my stainless steel tubes, of course there's a certain amount of wear and tear on them. You know, and even though you take care of them and you do things with them, you still might be using something that's not optimum.
Right.
You know,
Right.
maybe it's seen better days. It's still doing the job, but it's not great.
Right.
Well, now I get a great tube every time.
Yeah, you have that
You
consistency.
know, I get a
like,
great needle every time.
Right.
You know, well, I always had a great needle every time, but
right.
you know, but the
It
tubes,
takes that little bit of possible inconsistency just off the table completely.
Yeah.
Right.
So, like I said, if you get a bad heel or something didn't come back the way you intended, you know it was what you did.
Yeah.
And I think that helps us as artists because then we can go, okay, I know what I did there and why I did that. Boom, off the list. Where before we maybe had to see 3 or 4 or 10 come back and go,
Right.
okay, it's probably
something's
something I'm
off
doing.
here. Yeah.
So I think it helps us be better artists.
Yeah.
Right.
So for those that aren't artists, can you guys explain the difference between coil and rotary?
Yeah, go ahead.
A coil machine, basically, if I had one here in front of you,
I'll be right back.
Oh, Jack's going to help us out with that.
Yeah.
And then we'll have visual aids for this. And
I
basically,
have
it's
a
just
good rotary, actually,
you have
too.
a
good rotary that would have
It's probably more complicated than my black box. I guess we're carrying the show all on our own right now.
Just send them on their way. They'll be back soon enough.
Yeah, here's a nice good old swing gate you can use.
So,
for
oh
the-
yeah, I love a good swing gate.
And then
My
here's a
first
good
one.
rotary.
this one.
So,
Yeah.
oh no, so you guys' rotaries are a lot
And this is
different.
Wires
yeah, and we
visible.
both have our.
cam here, so that
Wow.
way people can kind
Yeah,
of see
that's a really
how
good
it works
example.
as a rotary.
Yeah.
Go ahead and let Sherry kind of tell about each one. You can start
All right,
with
in
them.
our basic coil machine, here we go. You would have your clip cord hooks into here. Your electricity comes in here, it runs around these little coils, and then it shoots up this little wire through the capacitor, and it jumps across the spring. And as it jumps across the spring, that's what drives your spring up and down. Now, this capacitor has all kinds of little tiny wires. Them little boogers can break and you don't even know it. Your machine's cutting in and cutting out and you think, what the fuck? And it's that stupid little wire in there. Or the spring gets out of adjustment if it's too tight, or it's too loose, or the back spring's too
Dirty
tight,
even.
or it's too loose, or it's got a little piece of fuzz on it or something. It doesn't want to do what it's supposed to do. It's annoying.
And as it's running, the adjustment screw here, there's a contact point, so it's constantly wearing away. So
yes,
it's as
so
you
it's
use
constantly
it, it's
ruining
adjusting.
its adjustment. The more you use it, the more out of adjustment it's going, and then you have to tighten up your screws. You have to file off your points. There's just
And then there's a rubber band that you position that you can position in such a way that it can affect the way the machine is running.
Right.
Also
you can
another
tension
variable.
up on here with the rubber band too. So yeah, there's a lot of things that need to be adjusted on these. Coils come in various sizes of various wraps. Capacitors come in various sizes and wraps. You can push machines hard. You can push them easy.
Yeah, and there's a bunch
They're
of
real
different
buggers.
the way the size of the coils and the wraps of the coils can determine what weight of spring. Some people like the contact point forward, some back for different things. There's just all
There's
kind.
a lot of
like you said, it's almost like a dual carburetor car.
It is.
You know, and they have to run exactly right. You know, you've got your springs, you've got your adjustment here, you've got your geometry, all that stuff makes a huge difference.
If anything's out of whack, then you're just not getting out of your needles.
You're not getting that optimum thing.
If for some reason it travels all the way down the needle and how it acts in the skin, you're like, what the heck?
Exactly.
So when they're running beautifully, it's a beautiful thing.
Right.
It makes that sound you just love.
Which we
And
also
that needle
showed
just
tattoos.
does the thing,
Right.
and you're just like, this is an awesome day. And then it goes,
yeah, and then it hates you. It's like a cat. It's a lot like a cat.
Right?
You know, they're nice and fluffy, and at first they're your best friend, and then out of nowhere their claws come out, they dig into you, and they take off. Like, what? I thought we were fuck. So on the other side,
now on this rotary machine,
It's pretty standard rotary. I mean, there's a lot of different models of rotaries.
Oh,
I think
hundreds
as far
now.
as compared to like coil machines, there's so many different types of rotaries.
but I think they
as far as-
basically work the
But
same.
they all
Yeah.
work the same way for the most part, and it's just more that our camshaft is a rotating motor now. Instead of going straight up and down with our spring, it's a rotation that drives the shaft
It
up
It
and
goes
down.
around, and the
Yep.
shaft is up and down at the other
Exactly,
end.
and it's hard for me to kind of
Right.
actuate.
show it. Yeah, exactly. Show it off, but this spinning drives this shaft up and down. Just
Right.
just a little bit of spin to it.
And when that shaft, when this tube is placed over that, it looks similar to that. That shaft will push on a cartridge that already has the needle all pre-ready to go into it. That will click, snap right into that. And that's a benefit I love about the cartridge system, is that one machine does your shading, your lining, your everything, and all you got to do is quickly switch and you're going. You don't have to sit down, reselect, and you don't have two set up. You've got this one thing, one wire, one you know, and it's just super quick. And when you're done, you take these little pods and you just throw them in your garbage.
See, it's almost too efficient. I need fuck off time.
It's efficient as
I
well.
look in the machine and set it down and mess it around.
It makes your setup and tear down time a little bit of show off.
Plus the weight is a lot different.
Plus you get to sit up and stretch for a minute.
You don't get the vibration, the noise.
That's true. The rotary machine has a lot less vibration than these old coil machines. They don't have all that heavy metal just in there banging on itself, you know.
Your hand doesn't feel so cramped up after a 4 or 5 hour tattoo.
So I'm wondering if it would reduce, like because like the curse of tattooing has always been carpal tunnel.
Right. I think you're still having that repetitive motion, and I think there's nothing changing with your left hand. You're still tattooing, and you're still, if a lot of people are like me, I still have carpal tunnel in this hand because you're still doing this.
The left hand does all the work.
Motion.
All the right hand has to do is hold the machine.
Hold on to it.
It's not doing anything. The left hand's stretching the skin. It's pushing. It's pulling. It's wiping. It's doing. You know, the left hand does all the damn
And if you're
work.
right-handed,
gets tired.
you're a lot of times, especially back in the days before the rotaries were popular, when you're using a coil machine, you have a foot pedal to turn off and on the machine constantly while you're going. You're constantly running and on and off and on and off your machine. So you had to keep most of your weight on your left. So when you're tattooing, you had the ability to run the pedal. So I always felt myself kind of chasing my pedal or not being able to move as freely around and have my feet under me and be as comfortable and as squared up to my... so now I think it's helped my back even, because with the rotaries, it's a lot harder on the motor to start them and stop them and start them and stop them and start them and stop them. Yeah. So what they recommend is just leaving them running. So I've even now will hot swap my cartridges while it's running. I'll snap the cartridge off, and I mean, it'll literally run sometimes for 4 or 5 hours at a time. Yeah, there's a way you want to do it. But yeah, so
plus you have less contact with the sharp part of the needle, which reduces the likelihood of cross-contamination.
Well, they call them safety cartridges because the cool thing is when they're not engaged in a machine, the needle automatically retracts up inside of there, so you can't hurt anything. And the great thing too, which I noticed not too long ago, when you're using a disposable tube that receives the cartridge, is if you remove the tube with the cartridge still on there, it is completely inert, because that tube is covering the plunger that could possibly push out that needle. Right. So even if you were to say you were at a situation where you're traveling or something, you didn't have a proper safes container, you could with some comfort or at least peace of mind going, okay, I'm throwing that in the garbage, but there's no way that needle could push out of that tube once it's locked into that. So there's a lot of advantages.
There is, and I think a lot of our modern stuff, and you mentioned this when you're on the road and stuff, I think it's interesting because of tattoo conventions. For years and years and years, we had to do everything at the convention the same way you did it everywhere else, with cups of water and inks and this, that, and the other thing. It was messy business. Well, I think because of the tattoo circuit, now there's so many conventions that there's circuits. There's people that all they do is go to conventions and tattoo at conventions or do guest spots. They're on the road. They don't even have a place of their own at home. And it's driven a lot of innovations in the tattoo industry. Because, for a long time, everything was kind of the same. It was just the same. People studied the technical parts, and that got a little better, but we still use basically the same coil machines, the same kind of inks, needles, etc., etc.
That they've been using since the teens.
Right, since they've been using since 1900. Which was based on the Edison pen. Right.
Which, if I remember right, wasn't the Edison pen a rotating?
Well, they credit the Edison pen, I guess, as kind of the first tattoo type device that people would grab and use it to tattoo. It wasn't meant to. It was the first Xerox machine. But the first coil, the coils were taken from a doorbell. If you have an old home with an old original doorbell, take off the cover and there will be almost a full tattoo machine waiting in there. There'll be 2 coils. There'll be the armature bar over the top, but it'll have a little ringer on the top, and there'll be a bell there. You take that bell off that coil, you put a tube on there with a pokey thing, and put juice to it, and you've got a tattoo machine. And that's what people still use to this day. That's exactly what that is. Yep. So now that is turned into something.
When the doorbells would wear out, the first thing that wore out on them every single time was the coils.
Yeah, those coils, or you'll break that spring. Because there's always wear every time that thing goes. So it's really come a long ways. So do you think there's been as big of an impact on your work from the machines changing as, say, pigments? Are you still using the same?
I think the changes in the machine do not impact the art that much.
Mm-hmm.
They only impact people's ease of use.
Right.
There's an old saying in
That's fine.
that's called "It's not the horse, it's the rider."
Right.
You know, a good rider can ride any horse. You
Sure.
know, a good tattooer can make a machine do what he needs it to do,
Yeah.
or he can work within the machine's confines.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
By example, prison work. I've seen some
Exactly.
beautiful.
great stuff out of something they cobbled together out of pieces and parts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Good example.
Right.
And so the machine itself, I don't think contributes as much. It makes things easier for us,
Mhm.
makes things nicer, cleaner, a
Right.
little simpler.
Right.
That's good.
Uh-huh.
You know, all that stuff is good. But inks, I think inks are so far and above. I was talking about this to somebody the other day. It's like, well, you know, back in the 80s,
Uh-huh.
ink was powder. It was
Yeah.
like tempera
Yeah.
paint.
Yeah.
You bought big old bags of powder, and you had to mix it with stuff.
Be a
Well, you
chemist.
didn't. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, of course, we went through all kinds of things. You know, it's like, well, do you mix it with alcohol or do you mix it with grain alcohol? That was a thing for a while, which we found out later was not the best idea. But you know, we were dumb tattoo artists.
Right,
We didn't
and
know.
there wasn't a society. There wasn't a group
There
that you could
wasn't.
talk to. There was
We
little
didn't
forums
know,
or anything like
yeah.
that. And the knowledge that one guy might learn might take years for it to creep to another guy
Right.
and another guy.
And be
That's
Or
right.
even
information
something
by that
bad.
time,
If somebody
too.
went,
Right.
oh my God, this didn't work. Like you said, it would take years for the rest of us to find
Yeah.
out this doesn't work.
Right.
Meanwhile, we're still doing it.
Yeah.
You know, and so so we did lots of things that were not the best ideas we ever had, but they
it's
were
all we had.
ideas.
Yeah.
And so we tried it because you just wanted to make your inks brighter and more
Yeah.
workable and
Mhm.
heal better. I mean, that's the mission was always the same.
Mhm.
Right.
Better tattoos, better experience for the customer, better healing, less headache for us.
Yep.
You know, we don't want to do touch-ups. We just want to put it in there, have it heal up, and go on to the
Yep.
next one.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's always our angle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the conventions really sparked off that beginning renaissance, in my opinion.
That's
true. Right,
That
There
brought
was
those
Right.
artists
Such
together.
sharing of
You
knowledge.
had
You
people
get
from
together.
all over the country
That's a
and the
good point.
world sitting in one room.
The first
going,
internet for
have you
tattooers.
tried this? Have you tried that? Have you
Right.
tried? Prior to that, it was all these isolated guys. A lot of them would last in one town for
And they
maybe
would
a couple
die with their
months.
secrets. It
Well,
was
and
a
yeah, they
big
would die with their
thing.
secrets, and people would tell you wrong things.
Right.
You
On
know, they would
purpose.
tell on purpose
Mhm.
because then all your customers would have fucked up tattoos and they wouldn't want to be your customer. They were trying to put you out of business,
Yeah.
basically.
Yep.
And so people were notorious for that.
Mhm.
So, and it's funny because over the years, I would hear people who are trying to get in the tattoo game and, oh, well, so-and-so told me to do this, that, and the other thing. And I'm thinking, that's not going to work out so good, you know,
Right.
but you're already doing it. You'll figure it out,
Mhm.
you know. And so,
I worked for a guy in
It's hard.
Chicago that would sell tattoo setups.
Mhm.
And at first I'm like, what in the F are you doing? Like, we do enough cover-ups and fix-ups and all that. I'm like, that's ridiculous, you know?
Mhm.
And then I realized that he would purposely detune the machines and basically fuck them up on purpose.
well,
So
yeah,
it
they
wouldn't
don't
work.
run good. And
No.
there's no way the guy that's buying them can
No,
figure out how to
because
make it run right.
Because we can barely keep them running right.
Right.
You
Right.
know, some dipshit off the street is just gonna mutilate. So yeah,
Butcher
and that
3 or 4 people.
and that goes right back to sabotage. You know.
Well, and he probably also figured out, because in one way, it kind of cures these people. Because these people get their hands on a machine, and without any instruction,
You're just
okay,
lost.
the first 5 tattoos you do are gonna totally suck.
Mhm.
And so it's gonna take a lot longer to find 5 more to do.
Right.
And they're pretty much gonna suck too. Well, now you've done 10 sucky tattoos, the word's out, nobody's letting you touch them anymore,
Right.
your
Yeah.
career's over.
Yep.
Yep.
You know, 2 weeks later, you're going to sell those machines to some other dumb fuck, and that's
it
it.
continues.
And, you know, for us, it's okay because we only got 10 cover-ups to do out of the deal. You know, it's fine.
I think we've probably entertained them for pretty long. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think that'll be that.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's that. Please subscribe, like us if you can, and we will see you in the next episode.
Bye.